Now let's take a look at BurpSuite. When you open up BurpSuite, at first it's going to ask you for a bit of information about your project. Typically, if you're just doing CTFs or just a random project, you want to select temporary project in memory. And if you have professional and you want to do it based on a specific project, then you can give it a name right here and it will just save that project's file for that instance within BurpSuite. So every time you go back to that project, you can open it up. But since we're more than likely going to be using the community version of BurpSuite, we're going to just skip this part and just straight go into start BurpSuite, which will bring us to this screen. And typically this is what you would see as soon as you drop into it. Depending on your version, sometimes things may change a little bit, but at the end of it, it all looks similar to this. The first thing that I like to do personally when I launch BurpSuite is to go into the proxy settings and click on the options right here to make sure everything is set and change them to my needs. But one of the most basic things that I do here is I set a request interception rules right here that says, hey, I only want to intercept for data that is within our target scope. So if the scope is set to a URL, Burp is going to catch that information and store it. And if it's something like google.com that's running in the background, we don't want to intercept that. So that's one of the things that I do first right off the bat. And we can close this out and go to our target and go to scope and do the same thing here. Now we can set the scope. We can say, hey, I want to test on this specific website. So in this case, I'm going to be hacking on ctfio.com. I'm going to go back in here and type that in and say include subdomains. So anything before ctf.io comes around, it's going to intercept and capture that data for it. And now if we go to our proxy and turn it on and we refresh this page and go back to proxy again, we can see that it is actually doing its job. And we can either forward or drop this request. In this case, I'm going to forward it. But that's one of the first things that I typically set up when I start hacking either on a pen test or a bug bounty program. So I highly recommend doing that. It helps with your data and it keeps these different tabs clear for you. So now let's look at everything that we have here, starting with target. If we go to targets tab and go to sitemap, this is where every URL that has been captured and ran through our proxy is going to show up. So right now I'm browsing API hackingup.io. It's going to show up on here. If I go to app, all the different URL is going to show up. And same thing with this specific URL. This is everything that has so far opened up in this case within this website. And every time you do make a request, you can do the same thing by going to proxy and looking at the HTTP history. I'm going to remove all these really quickly so we have a brand new. But if I now refresh this page, you can see that it made this request and it shows all the requests that have been made in the background of this web page. But we have to make sure this is off and we go back to our history and we can see that's only request. So if I make another history request right here and say like robots.txt, because it is going to be refreshing a page, it is going to show that here as well. So just keep that in mind. This will come in handy. You will see it sometimes in the later parts of the course. If we use BurpSuite, you will see me go into here and look at all of the data that is being sent here. The next thing you want to take a look at in these tabs is the intruder tab. This is more of a functionality that is geared towards the paid user, even though the community version has some access to it. But intruder is usually used for fuzzing. So if you wanted to, for example, pass a request to this and have it do some automated work, you can set it up right here. You go to payloads. So let's say this is the request that we're sending out. If I wanted to fuzz for a specific parameter, for example, I say, hey, this is the value that I want you to fuzz for. So let's say we want to guess for a username, for example, and then we go into the payload section right here. We create our payloads. If it's a simple list, then we can go in here and import it. But if you want to do numbers, for example, we can go to this right here and say, hey, I want you to do from numbers 1000 to 999, and it's going to do that for us once we launch our attack. So this is an option right here. I did it wrong right here. There we go. And we can say how many steps we wanted to do. So if we wanted to test every single one of them, we can do 1. If we wanted to do every 3, we can do 3, 9. And you can see the number for the payloads is changing based on the number of steps. You can also do a random. So say, hey, I want to just test these integers right here, but I want to only test for 1,000 of them at a time. So it's going to just use 1,000 random numbers in between 1,000 and 999. You can also set the max integer digits. So if you want it to be, for example, the minimum integer digits for it, let's say if you are doing from 0 to 999, you want it to be 4, you type in 4. You can also say the max is 4, and you can also say, hey, I want the minimum for this to be a fraction, for example, for whatever reason you're doing that. You can also add those on in here. But the cool thing here is that you can set what type of numbers you want to look for, and it gives you a lot of options specifically for this, so you can set them as your needs. You also could dates, so if you're looking for a specific date that leaks data, you can set it up, you can change the format, and so on. Really cool stuff here. We'll probably use this in a IDOR section more than likely. You can also set your concurrent requests. If you want to actually do less of these, you can create a new one, call it less requests, for example, and you can say, hey, the maximum number I want to send is 1, and I want to have a delay of 10 milliseconds, for example, before I send these out. So you can also create this for yourself depending on your use case. A lot of bug bounty programs do limit your number of requests you can send out, so keep that in mind that you have the option to change these out as well. You also have some of these settings here. I don't really change these as much, but if you get to it eventually you want to change them out, you also have this option. The next thing is the repeater. This is probably where you will spend the majority of your time. So let's say, for example, you sent a request. I'm going to go to proxy, go to intercept, turn this on. I'm going to refresh this page, and let's say we want to play around with this request. What you can do is you can either press Command or Control R. So if you're a Mac, you can do Command. If you're on a Windows machine, you can do Control, or you can just right click and go to Send to Repeater, and that is going to send this to the repeater, where you can repeat this entire request and keep seeing the results for that request. So if you have something here you want to test out, you can keep doing it here and see what the response is on the right hand side. You can also render this page. I don't ever usually render this, but if you find the need that you want to render this and you want to kind of see what it looks like, you can also do that as well. But here you can see all the response headers and the entire body of that request once it is done. Collaborator is a professional only use, so we're going to skip this one, unfortunately. It is a web server of some sort that allows you to feed it for your server-side vulnerabilities or other vulnerabilities that requires you to have data being sent to an external resource. Then we're going to take a look at Decoder. Honestly, with Sequencer, I don't use it as much. I'm going to skip it. It's not something that I've used personally, and I haven't seen a lot of people use. I think there are better tools out there for it. So I'm going to actually skip this part and go straight to Decoder, which is also something that I use a lot of times, which allows you to decode and encode data. So for example, if you are looking at a base64 file, and it says, hey, I only accept base64, you'd have to open up another tool. You can just type in whatever you want to encode into base64, and it's going to just put that in here as well. Same thing if you are looking at for example, encoding for a URL. So if you want to send this payload for test123 HTML tag, you can also encode it here as well, or you can just actually go and take a URL encoded format. So I'm going to type in test123 here with some spaces, maybe test123. If I grab this and put it here, if it was URL encoded, we can smart decode it, and it would decode all the spaces and things like that. So this is also something that you can do. It's just very much for you to be more efficient. So you have all your tools in here. You can encode and decode it in this section. You also could do that while you are looking at a request right here. So if I refresh here, let me go to hackinghub.io. We'll do test 123, just a bunch of different stuff. It looks like it's not in our ctfi.com because it is not in my BurpSuite scope. It's not going to actually intercept that. But now if I do this one right here, you can also see that there's some encoding here. You can actually decode it automatically by selecting that text, and it uses that same exact decoder on this tab, but it gives you the data here, and you can actually just apply changes. So if you want to do maybe instead of a space, you want to add a slash, you say, hey, I want to apply changes, and it just made the %2f, which is a slash, made that change for us and put it in that request. So you have that option as well. It's not always through decoder. I just want to kind of point out, if you see something here that is encoded, you can always highlight it and see if Burp can immediately kind of make those changes. You also have your comparator. This is where you can include a number of different requests. It will compare these two. So if there is data that's different, you can actually take a look. I think later in the course we'll have a chance to explore these, but I kind of want to just go over all the different things that are available in BurpSuite before we jump into our course. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the extensions. You can see right here I have Logger, for example. You can go to extensions and install whatever extension you want. You may have to actually install some stuff in the backend for it. I think I've already done this for mine. But one of the things you can do here is you can go here, and let's say if you wanted to install something, for example, for GraphQL or maybe a hackbar, for example, you can just go ahead and press install. It will take a couple of seconds and it will install it, and you can go under the install tab and either enable or disable it. So if you don't want to use it, you can disable it, and if you want to use it, you can enable it right away and have it load in here. We're going to look at some of these extensions later. I don't use a lot of extensions personally. I just use BurpSuite most of the times for just kind of messing around with my requests and fuzzing it. I'm probably not the best person to do a lot of these, but there are a couple of them that I use, and honestly, it doesn't hurt to have them. So you can just go down here and install it. So for example, for this one, it says we're going to have professional BurpSuite. So that's kind of partially why I also want to skip this, because it is a paid functionality that I think is just useless for us to cover. So just keep that in mind. If you do have professional, they have a lot of different cool technology here, or actually extensions that you can install that could help you be faster and better at your work. So this kind of is a quick intro and overview of what BurpSuite looks like. If you decide to use it, you're more than welcome to. You're going to see me during the course going back and forth between BurpSuite and Kaido. I personally use Kaido more and more just because it's simpler and because I don't need all the functionality that comes with BurpSuite. So I've switched over to Kaido, and it's also free and just easier to use.